What I have here are arrowheads. These are made of flint. Back in those days, the reason why they used to move from place to place was because of materials. Only certain places have flint. Only certain places have bison. Depending on the time of the year, you would set out to go and look for these things. You would try and gather as many supplies and materials as you can for your family, for your tribe, before the winter came in. When the winter comes in, we are typically stuck until spring. Materials like flint, stonework, different things like that. These are objects that are found during the summers and springs when the snow melts. They are traded from tribe to tribe because not everyone has these resources available. Finding a stone that is workable. It is a very important thing to have hunting implements, implements of war, different types of things. When defending yourself and your tribe, when finding food was a very important necessity back then, just as it is today. Arrowheads were typically small. You didn't need them very large. The purpose of an arrowhead is to be tied to the shaft, the long stick that comes with the arrow. You have fletchings on the back, feathers that go across. That stabilize the arrow in flight to make sure this gets to where it needs to go. It flies straight. The arrowhead's main purpose is to punch a hole through the skin of an animal. The shaft does the rest. It keeps pushing that head forward. Arrowheads have been used for hundreds of years, thousands. Definitely a very long time. When I say hundreds of years, well, there were different types of arrowheads that were made and knapped. Certain tribes and certain groups would use different types of implements. Not everyone used the same ones. So I'm being vague about the time and place, but they have a presence in America for thousands of years, definitely. The original ones, before arrows, they were the spear points. They were a little bit longer, a little bit wider. When the time of throwing spears came out of style, the arrow arose. Arrowheads were made by arrow makers, flint knappers, people who were very respected in the tribe. If you were a flint knapper, you pretty much had employment all the time. You supplied your whole group, your whole tribe with materials. The same way in the 1800s, a blacksmith was important, someone who worked metal for tools and implements. The flint knapper was pretty much the one before the blacksmith came about. A flint knapper's family was given materials and supplies from all across, different places where they would go. When they would move from one place, they would look for a certain type of stone. They would gather as much of it as they could, carry it back, and they would trade it with other groups. Using stone as a trade item was a very important thing. They would typically knap out long flakes called blanks. When you take these blanks, make them look nice, you trade them to another tribe. You could get food, supplies from that. Arrowheads were a very important part. A special type of flint knapper, the arrow maker, was one who would make arrows for the whole tribe. He was skilled in flint knapping, skilled in woodworking, skilled in hunting. They typically made arrows in pairs of 10. So you would have 10 arrowheads that would be made and sent off to the arrow maker, or he would make them himself. But these were a very important thing, spiritually and physically. They believe when you get an arrowhead, when you find one out in the mountains, it is a symbol of good luck. Because the arrowhead you find out there could have been out there for hundreds or thousands of years. These were in use for a long time, only until recently. When you find an arrowhead out there, they say that's good fortune. That arrowhead has been out there for that long. You will be on this earth for that long. If you find one of these, it's blessings for life, they say. They would typically use these as charms, necklaces, sometimes even earrings. They believed that brought along long health, longevity. But as hunting implements and tools, these were very useful. They were very common, but they were some of the most important parts of weaponry and hunting implements. You can make them out of flint, porcelainite, obsidian, any type of material that is a knappable material. That's what you would use to make your arrowheads, your flint workings, your knives, different types of things. But the funny thing is, a lot of places find arrowheads that are small. Sometimes arrowheads could be made into knife blades as well. Just a hard piece of stone that is tapered in a way, knapped, given a jagged edge that can cut through hide, that can cut through meat. Even a stone head like this, hafted into a handle, fit into a handle and fixed, that could be made into a useful tool. Another thing these arrowheads have is you put them in a long shaft like an arrow, then you twirl that, you have a drill. A lot of these heads had different uses, different applications. They were shaped differently, but I'm classifying them along the same lines. Potato, potato, exactly. Having an arrowhead doesn't mean it has to be an arrowhead. It could be a knife blade. If you have a large piece, it can be a spearhead. You can pretty much work it into any type of tool that you need. Either a drilling implement, a piercing implement, a cutting implement. Depending on the material you had, it was either a very easy thing to make an arrowhead or it was a very difficult one. When working with stone tools, you would use hammer stones, river rocks that were hard, to strike the material and break it into flakes. From there, you would typically take antler tools, punches, that would chip down the edge. So how you would do that, you would take a piece of hide or leather, you would put the arrowhead on the hide like that. You would get a little punch like this. This one's a little iron punch. You would put that on the tip of the arrowhead and you would press down and nap the flakes off. That is how you get fine serrations on an arrowhead. Typically, they would have used antler in the olden days, but that is your arrowhead, though. That is your important item back in those days. Hunting, warfare, utilitarian tool.